Welcome, investors, friends, to our exhibit Into Madness. For this exhibit, we will be covering art from the late 1700s all the way up through the 20th century. And these art pieces will all be depicting some of the darkest of human emotions, from fear to despair to distress. And this art can be either through the content of the art itself or from the artist the piece comes from. The first piece that we have The Death of Socrates by David in 1787. The piece here shows the despair in the people here. The historical context being that Socrates, the great philosopher, was sentenced to death by the government on the charge of his teachings corrupting the youth of Athens. Whilst Socrates here can be seen taking all of this with grace, using his death as one final opportunity to teach, the despair of this piece can be seen in everyone else here, from those leaning up against walls to departing up the stairs to hands in face, all of whom are mourning the death of this great man, including the one who will be delivering the poison to Socrates that will take his very life. He does not even have it in him, due to his own despair, to face the man who he will administer death to. Moving on to our next piece, from this neoclassical one to a romantic piece, we have The Raft of the Medusa by Guernica. A lot of this piece is shown in the despair, particularly in the bottom left quadrant of the piece. It's based on a real-life tragedy in which a French naval fleet is making a journey to Africa, but during that journey, the members of this fleet, of this raft, were severed from the main ship with all the captains. What initially was 150 men on this raft eventually were cut down to 15 by the time that they were found and rescued over 2 weeks later. And these people passed away due to fatigue and exhaustion and starvation, or by the desperate acts of others to survive through sacrificing them off into the waves or through consuming one another in cannibalism. This piece acts also as a romantic commentary on the French monarchy at the time, leaning back into Romanticism's emphasis on feeling deeply about things such as nationalism. Before we move on to this next piece, which is also a romantic piece, I do want to inform you that the visual content may be rather graphic for some. So if you wish to look away, please do so. I will continue to explain it and let you know when you are safe to look back. This piece being Saturn Devouring His Son by Francisco Goya. A lot of the graphicness of this piece and desperation can be seen in the very art piece itself, in which it depicts the mythological tale of Saturn from Roman mythology, otherwise known as Kronos from the Greek counterpart, eating one of his very children. This was done out of fear and desperation from a prophecy delivered by Gaia, in which one of his children would overthrow him much as he overthrew his father. And so out of an act of desperation to preserve his role as god of gods, he eliminated all threats to his rule, being all of his children. Moving on from this romantic piece to an impressionist one. Any who have looked away for their own sake can now look back as the graphic art has moved past. We have The Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Now you might look at this and not be able to immediately make out the emotional distress or despair in this piece. And that is because Starry Night is actually rather unique in our exhibit, in having the emotional distress not come from the artistry itself, but from the context in which it was made and the man who made it. Vincent van Gogh was a phenomenal artist, even if he was not recognized as such in his own time. After a breakdown of unknown origins, he went to mutilating his left ear with a razor blade. After that act, he later would institute himself into an insane asylum for his own rehabilitation. During his year at the asylum, he made many of his greatest works, including Starry Night. Being an impressionist piece, it would show off the night sky that he could view through his own window as he would believe he would see it, as an impression of what it would look like if the bars were not covering his own window. Moving on from Impressionism to Expressionism, we have another iconic art piece, being The Scream from Edvard Munch. Munch created this piece as a result of his own experience, where he was traveling through the fjord, and after a result of anxiety, as well as he noticed that the setting sun caused the night sky to appear as if it were blood red, and took those feelings of anxiety in a blood red sky and portrayed it in this expressionist piece here, in which he showcased those deep, dark feelings of fear, anxiety, and despair visually, in how the world warped around the man who was screaming and letting out all of those feelings himself, as well as with the sky turning blood red from his screams, just as Munch saw the sky go blood red in his inspiration. For the very last piece that we have, it is Guernica by Picasso. This painting shows off a cubist approach and interpretation of a tragic event during the 30s, in which the Spanish town of Guernica was bombed by Nazi Germany. The piece here shows off the aftermath of this incident, in which all the people are suffering through their own despair and confusion and fear as they try to make sense of what happened and why they were bombed when they were a rather neutral nation in this conflict. Through the act of cubism, of showing everything from all sides on a single 2D space, the art also brings us as the audience into the piece, as we see what might be a confusing set of shapes and images, and try ourselves to make sense of our own confusion and try to understand what exactly this all means. And with that, we conclude our exhibition of Into Madness, in which we dived into art pieces showing the depths of human emotion of fear, despair, and desperation. Thank you all so much for attending this day. Farewell.